I was born in these Harlem streets that some may call mean. Born in the St. Luke's Hospital on 114th. I'm a product of my environment, so I must come clean. In an era of drug dealing, crackheads, and dope fiends. 129th and 8th Avenue is where I call my home. But Harlem was all ours. In all hours we roam. From sunup to sundown was the devil's playground, but when the elders were around, we showed respect with no frown. That's just how we got down. I'll leave it there. Thank you, guys. So I am Ash Cash Exantus, and I am a financial motivator, financial educator, and what I do is help people change their mindset as it relates to money. And so as someone who grew up in the St. Nicholas houses, I am not a stranger to low income, but for some reason, I always just thought that that's just what it was. And I accepted my fate or how life was based on what cards I was dealt with. And so at an early age, I always used to figure out how I could make money. That's how I got the name Ash Cash. 8 years old, packing bags at the local supermarket. When I was 12 years old, I graduated from packing bags to going and selling T-shirts on 125th Street at the vendor or on 125th Street. And so I've always had a knack for entrepreneurship, always knew that life could be better. And then eventually, at 19 years old, became a banker. And I was a teller at the bank. They said I would be dead or in jail by the age of 24. But by 24, I was a VP at one of the largest financial institutions in the world. And so I started to change my mindset about money as I started to meet people, wealthy people, people who didn't have money, people who had a lot of money. And I started to realize that money is actually a mindset. I was able to meet people who had a lot of money but were still struggling. I met people who had no money but were happy. And so my mind said, well, it isn't about how much money you make. How isn't that true? And so I started to go back. I started to wonder, well, can I, someone who has grown up low income, not having a lot, no real opportunities, can I create financial freedom? And then I started seeing examples of people creating financial freedom. But I still wanted to go back. And so I want to talk today about money in black and white. And I want to give you the history of systemic economic oppression, but then I want to leave you with a way to take what you deserve. And so if we want to start and go back to the beginning of the founding of America, we all know that America was founded on enslaved Africans. And so that's economic injustice number one. And I always thought that, well, racism was about the color of the skin. But as I studied more and realized that racism was actually an economic and political tool. In fact, the first enslaved Africans were actually working alongside poor whites. And it came to a point where you could not tell the difference between a poor white worker and an enslaved African, because it was about money. It was about wealth. Those who were in charge were only caring about money. And so the white workers and the enslaved Africans, they slept together, they ate together, they even plotted to escape together. And so at the point where the settlers realized that this was too much power. And so that's when the institution of racism started to become part of the scheme. And the separation between classes, between people who have a lot in common. And so we fast forward to a point where after slavery, besides, all of the things that happened with slavery, we then come to an era of Jim Crow, where there's rules and codes and things that are set to make sure that African people of African descent do not have access to economics. And the same thing happened. This division of race based on economics and not necessarily prejudice. And then we could talk about the Great Migration, where the poor white workers started to say, you know what, we're going to start to get together and start to unionize. And what did the factory owners do? They said, you know what, we have a group of newly free slaves in the South that we need to make whole, give them opportunities. And so then you have this migration from the South to the North. But the migration to the South to the North wasn't all happy, though, because the free slaves amassed millions of acres of land that they owned. But because this racism existed, they were terrorized. And so part of them migrating to the North was about safety, was about living, was about surviving. And so after they migrate to the North, racism again pops its head, because this division of where the whites who are now unionizing are looking at the blacks as if they're taking their jobs. And so now you have this division as well. And so we can go on and on and on. After the Great Migration, we can talk about mass incarceration. We could talk about the era where I was born. I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, and we could talk about the crack epidemic. The crack epidemic that swept the inner cities. But where did the drugs come from? And so when we dig deeper and we look at the connection between the government, the CIA, and crack in our neighborhoods, we say to ourselves, well, this was a setup. We think about redlining, where home loans were not even being given to African Americans because they were deemed a financial risk. But despite that, we were able to triumph. And so now when I think about money, I look at it from a different lens. I say, despite all of the negative and economic things that were in the way, during slavery, we had millionaires. Some people may not know that. During Reconstruction, we had millionaires. Currently, we have millionaires and some billionaires. And so my point was, how can people who were dealt this economic injustice still come out on top? And I have this theory. And I say the theory is perspective. It is, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And the psychology of money is about your mindset. What do you rather focus on? I'll give you a quick story about the butterfly. When you think about a caterpillar, the caterpillar starts as a caterpillar that does not know where it can go in life. But in order for it to be its best self, it has to break through this chrysalis, this shell that it was born into. And if, for whatever reason, somebody wanted to help this caterpillar out and break the chrysalis so it can fly, it will wind up dying because it didn't gain the strength that it needed in its wings in order to be this beautiful butterfly. And so what happens? As the caterpillar is trying to break out of this chrysalis, it's building its muscles, it's building its strength, and eventually it breaks through and it becomes this beautiful butterfly. And so if you remove that struggle from the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, then we wouldn't have the beautiful butterfly. And so when you think about money and you think about the economic injustice that has happened, a lot of it is about endurance. It's about strength. It's about building you up to have you understand that no matter where you come from, no matter where you are, no matter what you've been through, you can always take your life to the next level. And so with this resilience, with this power, with this newfound thought process of perspective, my ask is that we now start to focus on financial freedom for everybody. Because when you think about it, we live in a democratic, capitalist country, which at times seems to be a contradiction. Because if you can buy democracy with capital, how is that a free democratic system? And so we need to become capitalists. We need us who have good intentions, who want to see the world better, who want to live our best lives for us in our communities. We need to become capitalists. And so in order for us to do that, we need to follow these 4 steps. And I've always heard that cash is king. And since my name is Ash Cash, I'll accept it. And I've also heard that cash rules everything around me. Cream, say cash rules everything around me. All right, so cash rules everything around me. So I'm going to give you 4 steps to creating financial freedom, and it's the acronym CASH, right? And so number 1, I want you to change your relationship with money. Instead of working hard for money, I need money to work hard for you. Instead of being the employer or the employee of money, I now need you to be the employer. And how do you do that? You do that with passive income. You do that with residual income. Creating a system where you work for something one time, and then after you work for that thing, you create a system that is paying you back over and over and over again. And so that's number 1. You have to change your relationship with money. Number 2 is A. I need you to act your wage, not your want size. A lot of times, we live paycheck to paycheck or not have enough and not have the capacity to start building wealth because we're living paycheck to paycheck, but we're acting our want size. We see something, we want it, we buy it. Somebody has a buy one, get one free sale, we break it into that savings account. And so we need to now start to live below our means. At your wage, not your want size. Number 3 is S, which is save and invest for your now and your future. Saving is not going to help you build wealth, but saving and then investing that money that you saved is. And so we have to now create this habit of savings, creating the habit of not focusing on paying our bills first, and then whatever's left over, that's what we figure out. We need to pay ourselves first. We need to create a financial freedom fund, not an emergency fund though, right? Because I believe that what you speak to the universe comes back to you. And so if you're setting yourself up for an emergency fund, now you're setting yourself up for an emergency. And so I want you to be intentional about your savings, and that you're going to be saving for financial freedom. So you set up the financial freedom fund. Make sure that it is at least 6 to 8 months of expenses into an account. And then once you have that financial freedom fund, you now begin to continue the habit of savings, and that money that you continue to save will now go towards investing. Investing in passive income, investing in real estate, investing in intellectual property, investing in things that will continue to switch that relationship with money so that you're not working hard for money, money is working hard for you. And then lastly, I need you to help the community because there's strength in numbers. The people in power know that it is the people that have the power. And so as long as they continue, and they meaning people who are wealthy, who have the best interest to keep us separated, as long as that keeps happening, then the power continues to go to one group of people which are wealthy people. Because if you think about the Great Recession of 2008, while everybody, I don't care what your color was, everybody saw a negative decline, but the richest or wealthiest 400 families saw an increase in their wealth by 28%. So think about that for a second. That during a recession and everything is happening, people are losing money, people are losing homes, the wealthiest 400 families continue to build their wealth. Because in a capitalist society, money and wealth is supposed to circulate. But wealthy people are hoarding it and not allowing it to circulate. And so as we think about helping the community, that means cooperative economics. That means starting businesses. That means supporting those businesses. That means using your investment money to help capital and help people seed their dreams and aspirations. Not asking for a discount, paying full rate. And so we have to help the community, because as my mentor in my head, the Honorable Sean Carter once said, what's better than one billionaire? I used to think that. I used to think it was two. I used to shout it out and say, yes, it was two. But then I realized that what's better than one billionaire is 1,000 millionaires. And so if we start to keep working together and helping ourselves, helping the community, making sure we're changing our relationship with money, we're acting our wage, not our one size. We're saving and investing in our now and our future, and we're helping the community. If we do that, we now shift the tide of economic injustice. We take what we deserve. We become those who are in power. And with the right intentions, we can continue to connect and live the life that we deserve. I appreciate you guys. I am Ash Cash, and I approve this message.